Hey there, I'm Sam from Professional Music Technology, and this video is going to be our beginner's guide to all the different types of guitar effects pedals. Now, even if you're a newcomer to the world of electric guitars, you've probably already realised that there's literally thousands of these cool little stomp boxes to choose from, so I can totally understand if, as a beginner, you find them a little bit daunting or confusing. Simply put, effects pedals allow you to change the sound of your guitar, either very subtly or a bit more drastically, depending on the kind of pedal and the settings that you're using. Now, although there is an awful lot of choice, with each individual pedal offering its own slightly unique tone and features, most of them can be categorised into certain effects types, which share a similar sound and some common controls. So the idea of this video is to try and simplify those different effect genres, hopefully making it easier for you to choose the right pedals to achieve the kind of sound that you're looking for. As this is a beginner's guide, we're not going to be going into all the kind of boring science of exactly how the effects work. Instead, we're just going to be taking a look at some of the most common types of effects pedals, having a listen to how they sound, and along the way we'll be doing a bit of jargon busting and giving you a few tips on how to connect up and get the best out of your pedals. So let's get started. So before we get stuck into the different types of effects that are available, it is worth taking a moment to consider whether you want to go down the path of either individual stomp boxes or an all-in-one multi-effects unit. Individual pedals offer a single type of effect, be it an overdrive, a chorus, a delay, etc, etc, whilst a multi-effects unit will offer a little bit of everything, but as it doesn't specialise in a single effect, they can sometimes be a bit of a jack of all trades, master of none. There's pros and cons for both, of course. If you're looking to play with lots of different effects, a multi-effects unit will usually be more cost effective. They're much simpler to connect up, you're only ever going to need just 2 cables, and they allow you to save preset tones, so you can recall multiple effect settings and sounds with a single button. They can sometimes be a little fiddly and less intuitive to use though, as you often have to scroll through complicated menus to program sounds, and a lot of tone purists will argue that digital multi-effects units sometimes sound a little sterile and lack the character of individual pedals. Individual stomp boxes, on the other hand, are usually a lot simpler, more hands-on and intuitive to use. They tend to be a little more unique sounding and are obviously more of a specialist in one specific effect. And speaking as a guitarist, building up your own individual pedal board, experimenting with how different pedals combine with one another is definitely a lot of fun, and it can get pretty addictive. This does, however, mean that things can also get pricey pretty quickly. The more pedals you get, the more little patch cables you need to connect everything together. You'll probably want to buy a pedal board to organise everything and make it easier to transport. And if you do end up with lots of pedals, you'll also need to think about a dedicated power supply unit as well. Now, in this video, as we're going to be talking about all the different types of effects, for simplicity, we're going to be using individual pedals for the examples. But if you did want to start your journey into the world of guitar effects by experimenting with lots of different effect types, and especially if you're on a bit of a budget, it's definitely worth checking out a multi-effects unit. You can pick something up like the Boss GT1 relatively inexpensively. It will give you a little bit of everything to play with, and they sound great, so they're an ideal starting point if you're unsure of what type of sound that you want to create. So now we're moving on and looking at the different categories that effects pedals can fall into. I thought it would be best to get arguably the most boring one out of the way first, and that's dynamic effects. And under this banner of dynamic effects, I'm putting compressor pedals, EQs, signal boosters and volume pedals. Now, throughout this video, I'm going to be referring to what we call a signal chain, which is basically the order that certain pedals are usually connected up in and how they affect the sound between your guitar and your amplifier. If you want to go into a bit more depth into signal chains, it's definitely worth checking out our how to set up a pedal board video, which I'll leave linked up in the description. But as a rule of thumb, these type of dynamic effects are usually best placed nearer the beginning of your signal chain, meaning that it'll be one of, if not the first pedal that you plug your guitar into. A compressor pedal does exactly as its name suggests. It compresses your guitar's output signal to make it a more consistent volume. Quieter notes become louder and the volume of harder playing is brought down. Popular with blues and country players, compressors help to increase the punchiness and harmonic response of your playing, as well as being used to increase sustain, as it'll automatically bring up the volume of a sustaining note as it starts to fade away. Best used quite subtly, common controls allow for adjustment of the amount of compression, and these often include attack and sustain controls, adjusting how quickly the effect kicks in once you've played a note, and then for how long it continues to squeeze the signal. Signal boosters and EQ pedals again do exactly what you might expect them to. A booster pedal increases the strength of your guitar's output, giving you a volume boost without adding distortion. They're most commonly used to fatten up a tone. They're great for beefing up slightly weak sounding single coil pickups, and they can work really well for pushing a clean sounding valve amplifier into an overdriven tone. An EQ pedal works just like the graphic EQ on a hi-fi system, allowing you to boost or cut bass, middle and treble frequencies so you can tailor your sound to cut through a mix. They can also be used to help combat, or if you're so inclined, enhance feedback frequencies. Finally, in our dynamic effects category is the volume pedal. Now these are really simple. They work in exactly the same way as a volume control on your guitar, allowing you to cut the volume of the signal going into your amp or other pedals, but being more conveniently controlled by your foot. This means that it can be used to clean up an overdriven amplifier sound, or to create lovely slow attack volume swells, which can sound really lush and ambient when combined with reverb and delay effects. So now we've got the slightly less interesting pedals out of the way, we can move on to some more fun guitar effects. So let's start with pitch shifters. Now there are a few types of pedals that fall into this category, mainly Octavers and Harmonisers. Most octave pedals will allow you to add harmony notes both an octave below and 2 octaves below the original note that's being played, and this means that you can thicken up a tone by adding bass notes. pitch shifter or harmonizer works in a very similar way to an Octaver, but instead of the harmony notes being set to just octaves, they allow you to choose the interval of the harmony note that's being added, such as thirds or fifths, etc. And that's great for adding to distorted lead lines. Some pitch shifters, in particular the Digitech Whammy, allow you to control the harmony or pitch of the note with a foot pedal, allowing you to create dive bomb or pitch bend effects, as made popular by players such as Tom Morello from Rage Against the Machine. Now, you'll probably want to place a pitch-based effect nearer the front of your signal chain before any modulation or drive pedals to ensure a nice clean signal for the harmonizer to work with. But unfortunately, even with the cleanest of signals, a lot of Octavers and pitch shifters struggle not to kind of glitch out when you play more than one note at a time. So if you did want to be able to add harmony notes when you're playing chords, you'll definitely need a polyphonic harmonizer, something like the Electro Harmonix POG, which stands for Polyphonic Octave Generator. And this can easily deal with chords or multiple notes being played at the same time. This type of octave effect gives you a lovely kind of organ sound or really fat synthy tones, especially when used in conjunction with a distortion pedal. Plus, they give you a great excuse to sack off your bass player. So if you're a guitarist looking to play either blues, rock, metal, grunge, indie, punk, pretty much any style of guitar music, a drive pedal of some description is probably going to be at the top of your shopping list, as they allow you to instantly beef up your tone, transforming a beautiful clean guitar sound into a snarling rock and roll beast at the touch of a foot switch. Overdrive, distortion and fuzz effects are all part of the drive pedal family, and although each of these effects do have very different tonal characteristics, they all work in a similar way and usually share common controls. Most importantly, a gain knob, which increases the amount of overdrive, distortion or fuzz. Out of the three, overdrive pedals tend to be the most conservative sounding and arguably the most versatile, covering a lot of musical genres. They can be used to add either a subtle bit of bluesy crunch to a clean sound, or at higher gain settings to create warm, smooth lead tones. Popular with blues and classic rock players, overdrive pedals such as the best-selling Ibanez TS9 or Boss BD2 sound absolutely fantastic when they're being used in front of a valve amplifier that's just on the verge of breaking up. They work really well to give the amp a bit of a kick, helping those tubes to get cooking and pushing them into a lovely organic sounding, dynamic and responsive overdrive, but while still maintaining the subtle tonal characteristics of the amplifier itself. Distortion pedals, on the other hand, tend to offer a more in-your-face, aggressive sound when compared to an overdrive pedal. Their harsher, grittier distortion tone is more commonly associated with heavier styles of music, such as hard rock or grunge, and their tight dynamic response makes them ideal for fast, powerful heavy metal riffing. Now, whereas overdrive pedals use soft clipping circuits to produce a very natural sounding signal breakup, and distortion pedals employ hard clipping techniques for their harsher tone, a fuzz pedal takes things to the next level, clipping the signal extremely hard, something that's known as square wave clipping. This heavily saturates the tone and compresses the distortion to squeeze out huge amounts of sustain, resulting in a very woolly sounding, or as the name implies, fuzzy distorted tone. The legendary Jimi Hendrix was one of the first to pioneer the use of fuzz pedals, and since then, classic models such as the Dunlop Fuzz Face and Electro Harmonics Big Muff have become firm favourites with anyone wanting to play kind of grungy, punky, indie art rock or noisy experimental guitar styles. Traditionally, you'll probably want to place a drive pedal after any dynamic or pitch-based effects in the signal chain, but before any modulations, delays and reverbs. You may have also heard of the term stacking drive pedals, which refers to connecting multiple drive or boost pedals together to see how they interact with each other, and this can bring out some really unique harmonic and dynamic characteristics. Now, whilst it is loads of fun experimenting with different drive pedal combinations, a word of warning, it can also become a bit of an obsession, and once you've taken those first steps, you might find yourself on a never-ending quest to find the holy grail of overdrive tones. The next category we're looking at is modulation effects, and this does incorporate quite a lot of different types of pedals, the most common being chorus, phaser, flanger, tremolo and vibrato pedals. Now, although each of these effects do sound very different, they all usually share a couple of common controls, mainly the speed and the depth of the modulation effect. Chorus is great for thickening up your tone, sounding almost like two guitarists playing exactly the same thing, but slightly out of tune with each other. Phasers and flanges add more of a kind of sweeping, whooshing sound, whilst tremolos and vibratos add a more rhythmic, pulsing effect. So as you can hear, modulation pedals can be used to subtly augment your guitar tone, adding some extra depth and intrigue. But if you do start to crank up the settings, they'll begin to create more pronounced, weird and wobbly, sweeping and throbbing psychedelic type sounds. Now in terms of signal chain placement, it's quite good to experiment with modulation effects. Personally, I tend to place them after any dynamic and pitch shifting or drive effects, but before delays and reverbs. There's no real hard and fast rule though, as you can get some really interesting sounds experimenting with where a certain modulation pedal should sit in your signal chain. A lot of players also prefer to run something like a chorus or tremolo through the effects loop of their amplifier, instead of directly into the amp's input. An effects loop bypasses the amplifier's preamp stage, so they're not really suitable for pedals such as compressors or overdrives, but they're a great option for connecting up modulation, delay and reverb pedals. Again, it's definitely worth experimenting to see what works best for you. Now when we use the terms delay or echo, we're essentially talking about the same effect. In the world of guitar effects pedals though, an echo will usually be referring to an effect that's emulating an old vintage tape echo machine, creating the quick slapback style delays that feature heavily on 50s style rock and roll or rockabilly music. Now whereas back in the day these machines relied on a short looped piece of tape, nowadays more modern delay pedals are capable of creating much longer intervals between echo repeats, as well as maintaining the sonic quality of the effect that would get lost when using an old tape machine. So the best way to think of it is that an echo is kind of like a subcategory of a delay effect, with most delay pedals capable of creating those shorter slapback style echoes as well as longer delays. But if you are specifically looking for an authentic tape style echo effect, a lot of dedicated echo pedals such as the Keeley Memphis Sun and Landlord Frothy Head will also feature extra modes and tone controls to help you get that lovely vintage echo sound. In terms of delay pedals though, there's two main types, either analog or digital. As their names imply, digital delays utilise digital circuitry, so they can produce very clean sounding repeats and some pretty long delay times. Analog delays, on the other hand, use analog components, meaning they tend to create a warmer, arguably less sterile tone, and the sound of the echo repeats will start to degrade as they fade away, as opposed to the crystal clear repeats of a digital delay. Whether you go for an analog or digital delay will really depend on your personal preference and the style of music that you're playing. Personally, I love the slightly modulated characteristics that you get from an analog delay, plus they also allow you to create some pretty crazy sci-fi sounding effects when you crank up the repeats and the delay starts to feed back on itself. You'll usually want to put a delay towards the end of your signal chain after any drive and modulation pedals, but they can also work really well when placed into an amplifier's effects loop. Most delay and echo pedals will have controls to adjust the amount of echo repeats, as well as the delay time between those repeats. This makes a delay, be it an analog or a digital, a really versatile pedal to have in your arsenal. They can be used to create the short doubling style slapback echoes that I mentioned earlier. They're great for fattening up lead playing with longer delay times. You can use them to add an almost chorus type effect when playing chords. Or, as popularised by players such as The Edge from U2, you can create huge sounding riffs using rhythmic strumming patterns that are offset against the delay repeats. The pedal that you'll most commonly want to put at the end of your signal chain is a reverb. Now, a lot of people initially get echo, delay and reverb effects a little bit confused. So to clarify, whereas echoes and delays offer a very clear, defined repetition or echo of what you play, a reverb pedal offers a much more ambient, kind of washy effect with no real note definition. Imagine what it would sound like to play your guitar nice and loud in a large warehouse or cathedral with all the sound reflections and reverberations going on. Now, you may already have a basic reverb built into your amplifier, but a dedicated pedal will give you much more flexibility and tonal options if you want to get a bit more experimental. Entry-level pedals, such as the Landlord Banging Hangover, will offer emulations of classic spring, plate and room style reverbs, each with their own unique tonal characteristics. But more comprehensive pedals, such as the MXR M300, will also offer larger, more diverse ambient effects, such as shimmer reverbs, which add an almost harmony-like element to the sound. So as you can hear, a reverb pedal can really transform the tone and vibe of your playing. You can get anything from, a subtle vintage sounding room reverb right up to an enormous cavernous effect packed with intricate overtones. And that's why reverb pedals are really popular with players wanting to create sparse, lush ambient music, or those huge Coldplay style uplifting stadium rock anthems. So the final pedal that we're looking at today is the wah-wah pedal. And thinking about it, this one probably should have appeared a little bit earlier in the video, as it's probably the first pedal that you'll want to put in your signal chain. Now, unlike most of the other pedals we've looked at today, which feature control knobs designed to be adjusted by hand, a wah pedal is controlled by tilting your foot forwards and backwards on the foot plate. Simply put, by moving your foot from the front to the back of the plate, the pedal is sweeping through a frequency filter, emphasising bass and cutting treble at the heel position and vice versa at the toe. This allows for a really expressive, almost vocal-like quality to your playing, hence the name wah-wah. Wah-wah-wah-wah-wah-wah-wah-wah-wah-wah-wah. Another really popular way of using a wah pedal is to use it to emphasise a certain frequency, and this can be achieved by setting the sweep of the wah in a set position, known as a cocked wah effect. And once you find that magic frequency, it can really help to lift your playing out of a mix. Think the tone used on the intro to Money for Nothing by Dire Straits. Without a doubt, the most popular wah pedal ever made is the Jim Dunlop Crybaby, as used by the likes of Jimi Hendrix, Slash, Kirk Hammett, and pretty much every other guitarist in the world. They sound great for funky, clean playing, but they also work really well placed before drive pedals or an overdriven amplifier for lead work, with probably the most famous example of a wah-wah effect being the intro to Voodoo Child by Jimi Hendrix. So there we go, that was our beginner's guide to guitar effects pedals. I think we covered most of the main types of effects here, but obviously we have only really just scratched the surface of what you can do with these little boxes of awesomeness. So now you know what each effect does, I do urge you to get down to your local PMT store and get experimenting for yourself. As you probably noticed, for most of the examples in this video, I was using pedals from the Landlord range of effects. I thought this was kind of appropriate for a beginner's guide, as there's some of the best value effects pedals currently on the market. At the time of filming, you can pick up any of these for less than 50 quid, so they're a really affordable way to get into guitar pedals. The amplifier I was using was also one of our most popular affordable guitar amps, the Boss Katana 50, and everything was connected up with our lovely Tortec cables, offering great quality for not a lot of money. Obviously, if you are building a pedal board, there's a couple of essential pedals that we've not really covered here, mainly a tuner pedal and a looper, as they're not strictly effects pedals. But if you did want to find out more about those, you can check out our 7 best tuners and loop pedal buying guide videos, which are on this channel. For more information on any of the effects pedals that you've seen here today, visit pmtonline.co.uk, and if you've got any questions, leave them in the comments below and we'll do our best to answer them. As usual, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, and don't forget to follow us on Facebook, facebook.com/PMT House of Rock. So thanks for watching, I'll see you again soon.